Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Donald Trump's Department of Justice announced this evening that former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted by a grand jury on 2 counts, making a false statement and obstruction. Now, the charges stem from Comey's testimony before Congress back on September 30th, 2020, and that specific date is very important because the statute of limitations on these charges is 5 years, which means the last possible date to charge Comey with this crime, lying during that testimony, would be September 30th, 2025. That is next Tuesday. In a statement, the brand new U.S. attorney prosecuting Comey, Lindsay Halligan, fresh on the job, having never, ever prosecuted a single case, wrote, quote, "The balance of power is a bedrock principle of our democracy. It relies upon accountability and a forthright presentation of facts from executive leadership to congressional oversight," misspelling the word principle. In a post on social media, Attorney General Pam Bondi said today, quote, "Today's indictment reflects this Department of Justice's commitment to holding those who abuse positions of power accountable for misleading the American people." FBI Director Kash Patel said, quote, "For far too long, previous corrupt leadership and their enablers weaponized federal law enforcement, damaging once proud institutions and severely eroding public trust." Of course, that is exactly what is happening here. Donald Trump's administration and the enablers around it are very clearly and forthrightly abusing federal law enforcement in a way that we have not ever seen, at least since Nixon and probably before then, to punish political opponents, people who say things they don't like, people who have taken political actions they don't like, or law enforcement actions they do not like. Trump can barely even bring himself to deny that he is personally directing these investigations and indictments.
It seems like an indictment on James Comey is imminent. Would this be the first step in accountability for pushing the hoax of Russia, along with Barack Obama involved as well?
Well, I can't tell you what's going to happen because I don't know. You have very professional people headed up by the Attorney General, and Todd Blanche, and Lindsay Halligan, who's a very smart, good lawyer, very good lawyer. They're going to make a determination. I'm not making that determination. I think I'd be allowed to get involved if I want, but I don't really choose to do so. I can only say that Comey's a bad person. He's a sick person. I think he's a sick guy, actually. He did terrible things at the FBI. But I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Okay, I want to be crystal clear here. All of the reporting we have, and we're going to have one of our own reporters who first broke this story, indicates that when Donald Trump says, "I don't know, I have no idea," that that's a lie, that he's lying about that. That was him today in the Oval Office, because we know that he has been directing this behind the scenes, and in fact, often publicly. This case against Comey is being brought in the Eastern District of Virginia. The previous U.S. attorney there, a career prosecutor, a guy chosen by Trump named Eric Siebert, a guy who had a good working relationship with Emil Bovee, who was the number 3 at Department of Justice, who prosecuted immigrant gangs like the president wanted. Well, he was pushed out last week. And the reason he was pushed out, in part, is because Siebert opposed bringing charges against Comey. And because of that, he was then swiftly replaced with the new U.S. attorney, Lindsay Halligan, who we just mentioned. Now, Lindsay Halligan is a Florida insurance attorney with no prosecutorial experience. She was once Trump's personal lawyer. Halligan was sworn in on Monday, and I have to say, today is a big day for Lindsay Halligan, who has now secured her first ever indictment. She went 2 for 3. The grand jury rejected one of the charges, but she's never done that before, so it's a big professional milestone for Lindsay Halligan today to get these 2 indictments because she's never, ever, ever done that before. It's now Thursday. James Comey has now been indicted, just like she was obviously appointed to do. It's clear as day what's happening here, right? In his first term, Trump tried to get James Comey to turn the historically independent FBI into a tool to protect his friends and punish his enemies. Specifically, he wanted Comey to drop the investigation against Trump's former national security advisor, Mike Flynn, for lying to the FBI. And now, 8 years later, Trump's new Department of Justice is going after Comey, they say, for lying to Congress, but really it looks like because the president has it out for him. Carol Lennox, an MSNBC investigative reporter. She was the first to report that Comey may be indicted along with Ken Delanian, and she joins me now. You know, Carol, the temptation when this news breaks and we have an indictment in front of us is to sort of go through the facts and the details here. But to me, that's a small part of the story that is much larger in context here because of you and Ken's great reporting about how we got to this point. As the person that reported out, how significant is this moment?
I'll use the words, Chris, that prosecutors and federal investigators are saying to me tonight, which is simply chilling. Chilling because a seasoned prosecutor who was appointed by the Trump administration, chosen by Donald Trump and his allies, looked at the facts in this case and said there wasn't a sufficient reasonable basis to bring it and was resisting bringing it, was pressured to resign or be forced out, thrown out on the curb, and he chose to resign. Days later, a person with no prosecutorial experience is the U.S. attorney, and these charges are brought. What's important here for people to understand is that prosecutors have a duty not just to see if they can get 23 people to say, yes, we agree with a one-sided version and we will indict this person. The duty is to bring cases only when you can sustain a conviction.
We begin with Trump DOJ's in crisis, though. And remember, much of what Donald Trump says and admits in public involves Watergate-level confessions if they were only in private. And he has turned that into something of a kind of political propaganda art, because what he has already admitted is a scandal for the DOJ in pursuing his perceived foes. Now we have more detail about the DOJ faced with the crisis of Trump's own making. After their own career prosecutors did not find evidence to indict Jim Comey, they are still considering whether to indict James Comey, of course, the former FBI director. And there's new details about all of this. The Washington Post reports prosecutors have already presented the new U.S. attorney with a written record about why there was not evidence to charge Comey in the first place, meaning they already looked into this and there isn't a case. Now, that could come back to haunt this Trump White House if they force a case which their own review found wasn't valid. Trump's most loyal allies also expressing some doubts. The Wall Street Journal reports that Trump pushed the Attorney General to bring the charges against Comey, and that, according to the Journal reporting, whatever you think of Miss Bondi and her conservative history, as a legal matter, to the extent that she may be looking at actual evidence or whether the case is winnable, quote, she's expressed reservations about the Comey case. This is a scandal from the DOJ to the White House. And while I know we live in a time where Donald Trump pretends everything's going exactly as he planned or just throws different words out and is accompanying with other distractions, we have indications that he knows this is bad, and it looks bad because he is misleading about, or at least disagreeing with, what voluminous reporting and his own posts online have showed. Listen to him hours ago.
I think I'd be allowed to get involved if I want, but I don't really choose to do so. I can only say that Comey's a bad person.
Fact check. False on the involvement. Donald Trump is involved. That's according to his own words, prior stated through his voice, through his mouth, and recently posted online. He is involved. When you are the leader of an organization, let alone the entire United States government, and you publicly say, directed at an employee like Bondi, that she should go after, probe, or get the indictments done of Comey and Schiff and others, you're involved, obviously. So he's denying it now today because the heat is on and it looks bad. The second part of what he said, that Comey's a bad person, I don't have a fact check on that. In politics, people are free to express themselves, their opinions of others. Comey has said negative things about Trump. Trump's saying negative things about him. That's both well within their free speech rights. So part two, their debate. Part one, false. The president stating blatantly false denials. The Times also reporting, separate from his public post, that Trump was demanding Bondi move faster in indicting opponents. Now, the DOJ also has a legal timeline, which, again, if you live in a world where you say, okay, Ari, I guess Trump will just do what he wants. Well, when it comes to what he says and certain things, sure, he'll try it. When it comes to actually having a case that sticks, that doesn't get tossed out or disqualified immediately, law and rules still matter. And Trump's DOJ knows that, because if they want to use the claim, or what many lawyers say is a pretext, a kind of legal lie, about why they're going after Comey, not because Trump asked for it, but because of his congressional testimony. There is a sharp deadline for that next week, after which they can't bring a case related to that issue. That expires Tuesday, 5 years to the day after Comey gave the testimony that they are now scrutinizing. But you can't just look at this in the isolation of Comey or Trump's misleading denial today, which contradicts his own recent claims in public. Take a look at the wider perspective here. We've updated a chart that could come out of any tin pot, banana republic, autocratic agenda. Because as you see from the upper left, you have members of the opposition party indicted. That case goes on. The second one against the mayor, the charges were already dropped. Again, as I say, a reminder that if you just throw complete baseless charges at the wall, they won't last. Mr. Comey in the middle was already interviewed on a different case, the seashells issue. If you remember that MAGA era thing, they were making a big deal out of a social media post he did of seashells that they said was a type of threat. That was why he was interviewed by the Secret Service. He's obviously being also pursued on this other matter as they review the testimony I mentioned. If you look in the lower right, John Bolton, the lifelong Bush neocon conservative, he was considered too controversial and conservative to get confirmed in a prior administration, served under Trump.
I think Comey facing this head on is quite brilliant, right? Again, I understand the apprehension to champion this man. In many ways, he's one of the, not the only reason, but he's one of the reasons Trump became president. In an election as close as the 2016 election, which was ultimately decided by less than 90,000 voters, right? Because if you move the right 90,000 voters in 3 of the key swing states, Hillary wins that election, right? And so it could be anything from Russia to Comey to Hillary's strategic failures, whatever. But the point is, he's still being railroaded by Trump. Even though he's a part of why Trump became president, Trump's attacking him. And I think him coming in and saying, let's actually fight this out in court and sort of calling out Trump is important because Donald, just colloquially saying, oh, this guy's a crook and rumoring about bringing charges and saying that I don't like him and blah, blah, blah. That, you don't have to prove those claims. I mean, sure, you could get sued, I suppose, but not really if you're vague enough, right? Trump saying, oh, this guy's a crook, he's crooked, he's corrupt, whatever, doesn't actually have to be proven. But once you bring charges, once you go to court, then everything's open. Discovery happens. You got to actually prove your case. You got to give your evidence over to the defense so they can cross-examine it. It gets pretty ugly pretty quickly if you're BSing, right? And so Comey coming out and saying this, especially in the context where Trump's own moves have given enough reasonable doubt, not only on the criminal charges, but enough reasonable doubt based on the fact that this is clearly a witch hunt. The timing is too inexplicable other than it being a witch hunt. Trump does, fires somebody or asks somebody to resign because they wouldn't gin up charges on somebody else. He gets his preferred person in, and in the matter of hours, really, charges are coming up against Comey, somebody who has been a Trump enemy, perceived at least, and, wasn't charged throughout all these other people, whether appointed by Trump or appointed by other Republicans or appointed by Democrats, because there's probably nothing to charge him with. And then now you get your crony in and now the charges come. This is going to look bad for Trump. This is going to be Trump on trial and Trump's cronies on trial more than Comey. And that's a bad combo for Trump.